The Miami Dolphins have officially fired Mike McDaniel and are now on their second round of interviews. What's next for the Dolphins? It is a great day to be a Dolphin fan. Just after we found out John Harbaugh was now on the market just yesterday, now that the news gets better for the Dolphins, and that is being on Thursday. They have relieved Mike McDaniels from his duty. Mike McDaniel is fired as Dolphins head coach, which is something that I've been banging on the table for. Have been just hoping that Stephen Ross would finally just cut ties with this man, and he did it, man. This is what I'm talking about. This is how the rebuild has to happen. You got to get a new head coach. You got to get a new GM. You got to get a new quarterback. And finally, just the things that I have been asking and dying for the Dolphins to do: new GM, new head coach, new quarterback. Now you're checking all of those boxes. It seems like Stephen Ross has listened to Dolphin fans that have been in frustration, has listened to the Dolphin fans that paid money to have things flying around the stadium, have been paying attention to fans booing him, telling him to sell the team and all of this stuff. Listen, this is great. This is just another step to where we eventually want to get to, man. So Mike McDaniel's time is done. Finished with a record of 35-33. I mean, talk about underperforming, man. Talk about a guy who came in hot, who was kind of, he did a lot of nice, cool things. I mean, he's a hell of a play call designer, I'll tell you that much. But when it comes to just things about being a head coach, when it comes down to discipline, when it comes down to putting your foot down, when it comes down to your play calling, your time management skills, Mike McDaniel ultimately failed this team. Like, he could not have been a successful head coach with the way he was going about things. He couldn't overcome adversity as many times as he said as adversity is opportunity. And ultimately, Stephen Ross just, I guess, got tired of hearing us fans complain. And this was the right move. And I'm excited because now, if there was any question mark, if the Dolphins were going to go after John Harbaugh, I think that's pretty much safe to say that the Dolphins are going to try to kick the tires on John Harbaugh. Not only that, so now I mentioned our GM candidates who we're looking at yesterday on yesterday's video. If you haven't checked that out, check that out and subscribe. But the Dolphins now have moved to face-to-face interviews. So the second round of GM interviews. And they also said that by Friday, here tomorrow, the Dolphins are expected to make an announcement on who their GM will be. I was all aboard with Hallaby, but it looks like the Dolphins have other plans. They're moving forward with face-to-face interviews on Thursday with Eric Sullivan, all right? John Eric Sullivan, which is the guy from the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, he's really good when it comes to player development from the things that I'm hearing. He seems to be the guy that's most fit and ready to be a GM right now from what I'm hearing. And the second candidate is the guy from the Los Angeles Chargers who was the assistant general manager, Chad Alexander. Now, here's why it's interesting. Chad Alexander was somebody who was just added to the mix. But why was he added to the mix? He spent a lot of time with John Harbaugh in his time in Baltimore, and he has a close relationship with Harbaugh. So if the Dolphins are trying to get Harbaugh, getting a GM like Chad Alexander in here would ultimately help the cause. You can sell him on, on Miami, living, beautiful weather. You can sell him that now you have a general manager who you have history with, who you obviously know. And then people probably question, like, yo, why would you pick Miami over New York, where New York has Jackson Dart, has an up-and-coming quarterback? Well, listen, man, this is a challenge for John Harbaugh. At least he'll get to come in and he doesn't have to take on Tua. He can go ahead and develop Quinn Ewers. He can go ahead and get a quarterback in next year's draft or this upcoming draft. He'll get to choose who he wants his quarterback to be. And sometimes when you're getting older, like John Harbaugh, maybe he wants to take on a challenge of that. Let me go develop a quarterback. I think he'll take on that challenge. I think the Dolphins are positioning themselves for a win-win situation, man. If you get Chad Alexander, you get John Harbaugh, it looks like. That's awesome, right? Talk about changing a culture, bringing a guy like John Harbaugh who's been successful, who's won Super Bowls here in this league. That automatically checks the boxes. Or let's say you don't get John Harbaugh. You bring in John Eric Sullivan, who seems to be, like I mentioned, from what I'm hearing, seems to be the guy that is most fit for this general manager position. Have him come in and see what he does. He'll pick his head coach. He'll pick his quarterback. and the list goes on and on. But here's the beauty of it all. The problems that were alarming, that were holding us back to rebuilding and getting this kind of thing steering in the right direction, were the three things that we have now moved on from. Granted, one is still on the roster, being Tua, but Stephen Ross is not playing Tua. Tua's days are done as being a Miami Dolphins starting quarterback. But the three things that were over our heads was that general manager in Chris Grier, was that head coach in Mike McDaniel, and was that quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. And now the Dolphins have eliminated those things. This is the time where this is just awesome, man. Dolphins expected to it'll be interesting to see who they ultimately pick tomorrow here. Is it going to be Chad Alexander or is it going to be Eric Sullivan? I think either of them, though, are fit for the job, are ready for the job, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, we just put up with so many years of Chris Grier and his terrible draft classes and everything that he's done to set this franchise back. We have to give this new GM the benefit of the doubt to kind of see. And it doesn't happen overnight. So please don't just judge the Dolphins on a 1 year. This guy gets it wrong. No, I like to give guys about 3 to 5 years to kind of show me. All right. By the 3-year mark, I kind of see, all right, this guy's put together 3 good draft classes. I kind of like what he's doing. So give it time. I think that the Dolphins, though, are doing all of the right things. I'm speaking for Stephen Ross. I think Stephen Ross is doing all of the right things that he was supposed to do to kind of get this thing going. And it surprised the hell out of me, man, because I honestly was scared. I thought Mike McDaniel was going to be here another year. I thought we were going to have Tua to play out that contract, that people were worried about all the money. Listen, we moved on from that. Hell, I thought Chris Grier was going to stay. I was surprised when he got fired. And that's just because the Dolphins and Stephen Ross just tends to hold on to things a little bit too long. But the fact that he was able to cut ties, he was able to now go through this GM process. I like the way he's going about it. I also spoke about him having Troy Aikman as a consultant. I like all of the moves he's doing. The question mark then became, all right, Mike McDaniel, what are we going to do? Waste a year? I talked about on yesterday's video. I'm like, hey, if Mike McDaniel's the coach and they got a tough schedule, they might be bad next year. It's only going to help. But, man, just to strip the whole Band-Aid off, man, this is the way a rebuild is supposed to happen. And I don't want people to get it twisted here. I'm not out here saying that the Dolphins now are going to be a playoff team, coming this fall. Absolutely not. Pump the brakes. But what I'm saying is we needed a freaking clean strip rebuild with those 3 prime roles. And we absolutely have checked all the boxes this offseason. And it's an early offseason. The playoffs are still going on. This is excellent news, man. Mike McDaniel. Shout out to Mike McDaniel. What an up and down roller coaster it was. But ultimately, 0 playoff wins. That's just not cutting it. Another head coach that comes in here to Miami and doesn't deliver a playoff win. It's just, that shouldn't be the standard. So I'm glad, once again, that Stephen Ross put his foot down. Now, as far as head coach candidates, besides John Harbaugh, honestly, man, you could talk me into a couple names. I do like Stefanski. I know a lot of people don't like Stefanski. I personally do. I think this guy has won Coach of the Year before. This guy has seemed to be, a pretty good coach, but he was just, the cards he dealt with in Cleveland, I mean, they weren't too shiny. He did a great job with the defense. I'm looking at Anthony Weaver, maybe giving him an opportunity. I know he's got a couple people ringing his phone right now. But, man, when I talk about how much like John Harbaugh is in that totem pole, he's miles and miles above those guys. So I'm doing every single thing that I can to get a John Harbaugh here, because that's how I ultimately think that we're really going to see a Miami Dolphins team that the fan base deserves to see on a weekly basis every single football season. But ladies and gentlemen, Dolphin fans, this is another day. Now we got 2 days in a row where you guys should be excited about something. Yesterday, talking about the GM search. Now you have Mike McDaniel fired. Tomorrow, we're going to get a new GM and find out what he's all about. Better days are ahead, Dolphin fans. This is a marathon, not a sprint at this point. We're headed in the right direction. Listen, guys, leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the thumbs up button. And I'll be back here next time. Fins up, everybody.